Welcome to the Faith Film Fan Podcast. We have Mike Nawrocki here with us, and you might know him as the cucumber, Larry the cucumber from VeggieTales. He does so much more than that. We all know VeggieTales, but he is an author, he is a professor, he does a podcast, and now we have Dead Sea Squirrels coming up. I cannot wait for everyone to start watching this. Welcome to the podcast. Tell us all about Dead Sea Squirrels.
Alita, thank you so much for having me on.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
Dead Sea Squirrels, Merle and Pearl Squirrel. They're an old Jewish couple who lived in the first century from Galilee, around the Sea of Galilee. Merle decides that he's always wanted to go to the Dead Sea because he's heard that you can't sink, and so he builds a little raft and he takes his bride Pearl down the Jordan River. They spend a lovely day at the Dead Sea until they figure out how hot and dry and salty it is, and they run into a cave to get shelter from the hot blazing sun, and they get lost in the cave and dry out, and end up spending 2,000 years preserved in a Dead Sea cave. And in the modern era, a little boy named Michael is at the Dead Sea with his dad, who's an archaeologist on a dig. Michael stumbles across these squirrels, thinks they're great like vacation souvenirs, stuffs them in his backpack, brings them back home to Tennessee, sets them up on his windowsill so they don't stink up his room. It rains, and they rehydrate and reanimate. And so now we've got two squirrels from the first century alive in the 21st century who help Michael and his friends as they go through problems that 10-year-old kids go through with stories from the old from the New Testament and the life of Jesus and the disciples. So that's sort of the general conceit of the show.
So good. I mean, how could you not watch that? How could kids not be entertained by that? But there's a faith message all intertwined. I was looking at all the episodes. So this is an animated series and
Yep.
it's what, 13 episodes? Is that right for the first
Yes,
season?
13 episodes. Each episode is about a little under a half hour long. Yeah.
I was like, I can't wait to watch them. This is gonna be good.
Oh, thank
So
you.
it comes out on Minno starting February 14th, correct?
That's right. Yep. It launches February 14th on Minno. And we're excited. And we're going to, there'll be like three episodes, I believe, that come out initially. And
Oh,
then
nice.
two episodes, every week will kind of, come out slowly until all 13 are out sometime in March.
How did you come up with this concept? I mean, that sounds uh in depth,
Kind of
and
nuts.
yet you're making it right, and yet you're
Yeah.
making it for children. How
Yeah.
did you come up with this?
Well, back in my VeggieTales days, I wanted part of the with VeggieTales, we drew a line early in the sand early on to never depict Jesus as a vegetable.
Mhm.
We were irreverent enough with VeggieTales, but felt like that would be crossing the line, and so, but which obviously doing that eliminates a lot of the new types of New Testament stories you could tell. And so we would hear that a lot. Well, why don't you tell more New Testament stories? Well, it's because of that. And so I wanted a show idea to be able to do that. And so when I left Big Idea in 2016 full time, I started to develop that as an animated series because that's what I knew. And a friend of mine who had been in the publishing industry for years asked, "Hey, Mike, have you ever thought about this as an early reader series?" And I hadn't, but I thought that was an interesting idea. So I kind of developed it along those lines as sort of a, like an early reader, kind of picture book, kind of along the lines of Diary of the Wimpy Kid or Captain Underpants. And so I worked up a kind of a pitch that way, and then shared that with Tyndale Publishing out of Chicago, and they loved it, and I started writing the books. But it was sort of driven by that notion of just wanting to share more stories about Jesus and the disciples, and give kids a better idea of the geography. I was a map kid. I loved Lord of the Rings and
Yeah.
books with maps, and so a lot of the show takes place in modern day Israel, where the kids are going around seeing where Jesus lived and ministered, and just to kind of show kids that a lot of times you hear Bibles, kids will hear a Bible story and it's this faraway place and it's kind of
Yeah.
maybe make believe, but no, this is a real place in the world and with real geography, and this is where it was. And so for me, that was exciting to be able to
Mhm.
share that in story form. So those kind of were all the things that went into it.
Yeah, I love that. So you're teaching them geography, New Testament, Jesus,
Yeah,
Two
yeah.
squirrels.
Two squirrels. There's so many things. And music. So music is a big part of it. The we have a flashback song in every episode, and that's when we flat everything else takes place in the modern day, but there's a theme that comes up that's best answered, by biblical story. And so we'll flash back to when Merle and Pearl, back in the day, and that happens over music. It's a 2 to 3 minute song typically, and that'll happen. So if it's Jesus at the Sermon on the Mount, that'll be done musically, singing about, do unto others what you want done to you, that then Michael can use in the modern day. So music is a big part of the series as well, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, kids learn so well through music. I can
Yeah.
just imagine, I mean, parents who may not know these stories really well, they could be sitting down with their children, growing in their faith as well.
Oh, believe me. Yeah. I mean, I feel that way too. I mean, obviously when you go to research a story, it's like, I thought I knew the story. It's like, oh no, I've got to, there's so much that I learn by, just telling the stories. But I hear that all the time, about VeggieTales, when we would tell a Bible story, a lot of times people say, I remember that best by the VeggieTales version of it. And it's like, we want you to substitute in, real people into the VeggieTales characters, but just sort of the flow of the story. It's that we tried to be as accurate as we could with all of that. But yeah, I think it's a great way for kids to learn and for parents to learn too, like you
Yeah.
said.
And the age range for this animated series, what would you say that is?
Well, so the books are geared for early readers, so anywhere from when kids first start reading around kindergarten, to first grade, all the way up through fifth or sixth grade. So that's sort of, and I think that the animation tracks pretty closely. So I think grade school kids are going to really appreciate this. I think younger preschool kids will also like it, but
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a preschool show. It's more geared toward a little bit older grade school kids.
So good. Tell me about some of the themes in each of the episodes because I was reading through them. I'm like, these are really powerful for kids those ages
Yeah,
to get it really in their heart, not just, okay, be told these principles, but actually
right.
get it in their heart and live it out because they've
Yeah.
seen the episodes.
Yeah, well, and really, what you're saying and what you're pointing out, I think, is the power of story.
Right.
It's like to hear the words being spoken are one thing, but to see that play out over a story with characters who the kids invest in and get to know and love, and to see them go through it. I mean, they place themselves in that situation, and it's such a great way to learn. The pilot episode is about honoring your father and your mother, and then we talk about the golden rule from the Sermon on the Mount. Do to others what you want done to you. Telling the truth. Self control. Those types of lessons. And the whole, it's a 13 episode series, and there's a larger story that plays out over 13 episodes. So hopefully there's kids are kind of want to come back and see, ooh, what happens next, what
Yeah.
happens next. But each
Yeah.
individual episode plays through a theme where they can learn the lesson of the theme. When we get into the back half of the season, more of the lessons are about the life and ministry of Jesus. So when Gabriel announced to Mary, the birth of Jesus, or when Mary visited Elizabeth, or the nativity itself, or when Jesus was baptized, so those instances, and specifically where in Israel that all happened, is part of the kind of the lesson of that show. So
So
yeah, so
good.
that's generally how we structure it.
This is a huge project. I'm sure you have an amazing team working with you. Tell us about that.
Well, it's really fun. I like I mentioned, I teach at Lipscomb University, or I think you mentioned that. So, or a teacher. So, the producer who's producing this with me is somebody that I've worked with at the school, and it's actually somebody who I've been a big fan of for years, Steve Taylor. He's a musician and also a filmmaker. Steve's producing the show, but the way that we've structured it is to be able to kind of utilize students and give students experience on working on a production. So we've partnered largely with a New Zealand animation studio. They do most of the animation, but all of the pre-production and all of the post-production are done here in Nashville. And we've carved out. I mentioned the songs. those songs end up being like little mini productions that we then are able to hand off to the students, and we set up a class around it. We actually pay them to work on the show. These are more advanced students, like juniors and seniors as animation majors. We've got a great film and animation program and a great theater program at the university. And and we've cast students in voiceover roles as well, so we're able to pay them. They're able to get experience, IMDb credit, and then that will help them launch them into their careers. And so that's been wonderful. And then also being in Nashville, just the access and the friendships that we have with local gospel artists, and to get them involved in the music. Matthew West has joined us, Ellie Holcomb, Mac Powell, just really amazing singers that have graciously come on board to be part of the project. So it's just been it's been amazing to see how I feel God has kind of orchestrated this whole thing and put it together in a way that I could never have dreamed of or imagined. But it's just really neat to see it all come together.
Yeah. How long have you been working on this project? When did it originate?
So I began developing the stories in 2016. I got the book deal in 2017, and then so finished. There's 12 books that the 13 episodes are based off of, and then I think when I was about book 9 or 10 in, that's when we started on the pilot, on the animated pilot. So so all the way back to 2016. So it's been about 9 years. So it's taken a little bit of time.
And you had to raise funds for that. I know that at one point you were doing a fundraiser and then something came through quickly. Tell us about this story.
Yeah, so and it's fun to see. If folks go on YouTube, they can find our fundraising trailer that we did for Kickstarter, and we put that up, and we immediately, somebody had reached out to actually help out, funding a bigger portion of the show. We I don't have a lot of experience with Kickstarter. Steve Taylor does, and so by a couple days in, we're like, you know what? I don't think we're gonna. This isn't not gonna work for us through normal Kickstarter means. But one of the folks that we connected with through that process was willing to invest enough money for us to make 5 additional episodes. So we funded the pilot through through an investment. Somebody came on board. The Cook Family Foundation came on board for 5 more episodes. And then I had worked with Chick-fil-A and the Cathy family back in my VeggieTales days. We shared the pilot with them, and they loved the concept. And so we were able to get, the rest of the show funded through, a Good Name Foundation, which is through the Cathy family. So it's just really cool how all that came together. And, it's just, yeah, it's hard to get something off the ground. And there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but it's out there and it looks great and everybody's happy. And so it makes all of that toil worth it.
Well, 9 years of toil, right? Nine
Yes.
years before you see it come to fruition. How
Yes.
exciting. I
Yes.
just think there is such a need for animated series for children and faith-based, something that parents are happy to set their kids down when it's time to relax and sit in front of a
Yes.
screen, put
Yeah.
them in front of something that is going to build their faith. I'm just so thankful that you've dedicated 9 years of your life to make this happen. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. Well, and I love it too. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's also just really fun to work with other creative people and bring something to life. I mean, it's very gratifying. So, thank you very much. And I do think, yeah, like you said, I think kids, story is very formative in kids and how they see the world. And I think it's so important to, the values that kids are picking up in their entertainment to reflect the values that their parents want them to have. And so much media is lacking, any kind of biblical values. And so I think it's really important to have that in shows that are really truly entertaining, that kids would just as soon want to watch than anything else out there.
Yeah.
And there's no reason why that can't be.
Yeah. So you have been in this line of work for a long time. How did you get started in children's faith-based entertainment? I don't know if that's what you would call it, but that's what I'm going to
Yeah,
label
yeah.
it as. How did you get started? Like, what motivated you or what inspired you to get into this line of work? I mean, it's a very, very niche line of work
Right,
industry.
right, exactly. Nobody grows up thinking they're going to be an animated cucumber. I'll tell you that. At least I didn't. This is what I
Oh
want.
yeah,
This is what I
nobody
want for
does.
myself.
Nope.
Um,
Oh, that's
well,
funny.
but I was, growing up, I was a theater kid. I mean, I loved, plays. I loved singing and performing and music,
Yeah.
being on stage. I actually, from middle school on, but I started going through like a real growth spurt, like in early high school, and I started to get really tall and gangly, and felt like much more self-conscious on stage, and so I started like, okay, I love entertaining people, but I don't like being up in front of them. so so that kind of got me into puppetry, so it's like
Oh,
so this is back in the 80s. I mean, Jim Henson and the Muppet Show were
yeah.
big back then. And so it's like, oh, this is really fun. But for me, it was just a hobby. I loved it. But I grew up in the church, and when I was in 11th grade, I went forward at a youth convention and dedicated my vocation to ministry. I didn't know exactly what that was going to look like, but my dad was an engineer in the Air Force. My mom was a nurse. My older brother at the time was a chemistry major in college, and so I kind of put all those pieces together in my 17-year-old brain and thought, okay, well, I'm going to be a medical missionary. That's what I'm going to do. And so the church that I was a part of, the Christian and Missionary Alliance denomination, had a small denominational college up in Minneapolis. So I thought, okay, I'll go up there for a year or two, get some Bible classes, and then transfer over to another school to do pre med. And so I went to St. Paul Bible College, it's now called Crown College. Took some classes, but I also did student ministry and puppets in the puppet ministry. And I met a guy named Phil Vischer, who many people may recognize as the voice of Bob the Tomato. So Phil and I, before VeggieTales ever existed, obviously, were writing and performing these really weird puppet skits. We used to say we like traveled the Minnesota countryside scaring the Baptists with our puppets. and
Okay, wait, hold on. Is there any videos of this original?
I'm sure there are. This is pre-internet days, so there's probably some on somebody's like really poorly, VHS
I, f-
camcorder.
I feel like we need to Google this and see if
Yeah,
we can
yeah.
find
Maybe
videos
somebody
of
has
this.
uploaded something. Yeah. So, but we were. It's so good to be. Like kids now, everything they do is online. It's like when we were growing up, it's like you can forget about that stuff. It's lost to history. But so great creative collaboration. Phil wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be a doctor, as I mentioned. We were going to move out to California and be roommates to go to film school and pre-med respectively. Well, Phil landed a job in Chicago working at a video post house and decided, okay, this is what I want to do, so I'm not going to continue on. And I thought, well, there's just as many places to go to, pre-med in Chicago. So I moved out to Chicago. We were roommates. I ended up, while I was in school at the University of Illinois at Chicago, landing a job where Phil worked as a graveyard shift VHS duplicator. So I was doing that to pay my way through school. And in the meantime, learning more production. And we started, what we did with puppetry. We were now we had all this fancy equipment to play with, including computer animation, which was just sort of, emerging. And so we were in the right place at the right time to say, hey, wait a minute, we could, if we had simple enough characters with no limbs, no hair, and no clothes, because all those were really hard to do. If we could have simple characters, we could kind of tell stories kind of like we did in our puppet days. The same month my Peace Corps came in, we got funding for our very first show. And so it was a big moment in my life where it's like, okay, God, what do you want me to do with my life? I've spent all these years in education kind of going for this, but now this is something that I feel like, okay, I have so much fun doing this. Is this a real job? I don't know. And so just, prayed about it and asked the people in my life who knew me best about what they thought I should
Wow.
do, and that's the direction that I took. So yeah, it was nothing that I had planned for myself for sure, but it's just been so amazing to have been able to do that all these years.
And imagine if you had made the other decision. There would
Oh
be no
yeah.
VeggieTales, most likely. There would be no Dead Sea Squirrels. We wouldn't be sitting here right now with these animated series available for children. It's amazing how God works, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And it was one of those moments too where I knew I kind of was conscious of that. It was very clear, like, okay, whatever I decide here is going to, my life is going to look very different based on
Yeah.
this decision. So yeah, yeah. But
Well,
I'm so glad.
I would say you took the riskier choice. You didn't know what was gonna happen starting out with
Yeah.
VeggieTales. You didn't know it was gonna be one of the most well-known
Oh,
children's series ever for a
yeah.
faith-based
Yeah,
programming.
absolutely. Had no idea, but and that's what I tell students now. It's like, that what pursuing your giftedness, what your gifts are,
Yes.
which ultimately are about helping other people and serving God. That's going to be your place of greatest joy and where God ultimately wants you. And of course, yeah, I think being a doctor is awesome, but that's God had different plans for me, and I'm just so thankful that that's the route that I've been on.
How ironic you're a professor and then doing children. I mean, what a variety of talent that takes on your end.
Oh, well, and it's like things that just doors that have opened for me that, I never would have
Yeah.
guessed for myself. So I'm just feel so fortunate. And I'm very busy, but I love everything that I do.
So Dead Sea Squirrels available February 14th and it's on Minno. So help us understand Minno.
So Minno is a streaming service for kids. Folks can go to gominno.com to find out more about that. It's an app just like any other streaming app to where you've got a lot of different content to choose from, including VeggieTales. So VeggieTales, Minno carries VeggieTales along with other things, and now Dead Sea Squirrels. They're specifically faith-based, so parents can really trust that when they put on shows for their kids, they're going to get solid teaching, entertaining shows, and they're not going to have to worry about other stray content that their kids may stumble on. So I think it's a really great service, and it's run by some amazing people. And we couldn't be more thrilled to be partnered with them.
So good. So good. It's going to be available February 14th. Dead Sea Squirrels, 13 episodes, perfect for your kids. We might learn a little bit as we watch these series too.
Let's hope
I'm
so.
excited about that.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah, no, we're excited. I think we want to make sure that the lessons and the values are appropriate for smaller kids, but just like with VeggieTales, humor, it's like, it doesn't matter if the kids miss some of the jokes, I just want the adults in the room to be laughing along and hopefully the whole family enjoys it.
Yeah, so good. Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you for your faithfulness and just putting this together, dedicating your life to changing families. It's not just for the kids, it's not just for the parents, it's literally changing the trajectory of families in the future. So thank you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Alita. I'm honored.